Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, and soon this show will be streaming live on Roku TV network, a game-changing event for the IBM TV and Pod TV family. And we want to congratulate Nick Paladiva and Kimberly Calhoun and all of the production artists and team who have led us to this point. Today, before I begin my monologue, I did want to wish everybody a happy Women's History Month. Today, we celebrate Women's History Month, which was commissioned by the Sonoma County Commission in California in 1978 to dedicate 1 month to honor the trailblazing achievements of women who have changed the history of the world, the history of our nation, who have led fights for civil rights, voting, who have been politically engaged and trailblazers, and the women trailblazers who have changed our society. To take a point of personal privilege, I want to say that the smartest women, people in my life, or many of them are women. My mother, my wife, my mother-in-law, who served as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force as an immigrant from India, and my daughter, although I will say my son and daughter are equally smart. And my niece, Shea, and my sister-in-law. I could go on and on. But we want to thank all women for their remarkable contributions to our nation and world. And on this show, this month, we will be asking you to share your ideas, the women that we need to be talking about on World Edition, who have been trailblazers. Now I want to begin my update on the Russia crisis. I think it's important, and we know that we will be having an international show with Sasha Starr and others eventually. I think it's every Tuesday and every week, twice a week. But right now, as I read on Russia, things are not going so well. The Russian military has taken no major cities down yet, and the Ukrainian resistance is fighting hard, harder than we imagined, defending their airspace, downing Russian planes and helicopters. And on the streets, Russian vehicles and dead soldiers we see amidst the dust of a war-torn Ukraine. President Putin's only strategy now will be most likely, many analysts think, to do what he did in Syria and Chechnya, which is attack civilian areas. They predict that he will now go to the heart of the city of Kharkiv, making his way, showing bombs and ammunition into residential areas, hoping that he will get civilians to flee. That will make it easier for Russia to take over the cities. In addition to the Western European countries providing ammunition and not really troops, but ammunition and supplies, you have Turkey providing drones. You have a lot of military assistance going on. Let's finally talk about the economic path, the economic challenges that are facing Russia. Well, the United States has said they will freeze Russian assets. Switzerland has already done so. The ruble is down, continuing to decline. And many Russians are running to ATM machines, worried that their country may run out of cash. Only time will tell whether the strategy would work. But Putin, if he is to be successful, needs to escalate this war, or it could be a failure. He will not stop right now. He will continue. But at the end of the day, what I'm amazed about is the fight and will of the Ukrainian people. On behalf of our Pod TV family, we want to tell each and every one of you out there, and if you're watching this show, that we are so very grateful and inspired by the fact that in the midst of facing death, you are still willing to fight for freedom. You are willing to die for freedom. And as we watch this show in the United States of America, I want every American to realize that. Here we are in the Republic of the United States of America, and we are fighting with political rancor and bitterness and division, the likes of which we have never seen before. And thousands of miles away in the city of Ukraine, a very nascent and new democracy is willing to die for the freedom that has been granted their people. I cannot think of anything more inspiring and humbling than watching the Ukrainians fight. We pray for you. We pray for our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, and we will continue to monitor the situation in Russia. Thank you for joining us today. We are live from the All-America city of Morrisville in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, the 7th largest state in the United States of America. And with us today, we have Nick Paladiva, the founder of Pod TV, soon to be Roku TV network, Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, and others who might be joining us today. I want to kick it off today with Women's History Month. For those of you around the world, share the ideas. But Nick, we'll start with you. Every day we want to talk about a woman, a trailblazer. Who do you think we should talk about today?
Oh boy, probably somebody that gets people riled up on both sides of the equator. Hillary Clinton, okay, who's definitely a trailblazer. She won the election by popular vote, but lost because of the Electoral College. And of course, she mentioned her name and Donald Trump at the same time, and you just created a fight here in the United States. But there's some good news, because I did see that this morning. I saw, hey, it's going to be Women's History Month all month long. And then we're going to have Shaquille Latimer join us later on from Down Under. And you know how much he loves months like that, related to like women's history or related to Black history. He'll probably flip out, but he's right now behind the stage. So
yeah, I guess I think Hillary Clinton is a great one. I think there's so many. I mean, sure. We're going to maybe do one or two every show. One woman I think that was a game changer, and I've been watching The Crown at night before I go to bed to relax, is Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, the first one. That was amazing to see kind of how she became the Prime Minister. Right. Of course, Indira Gandhi, who was the Prime Minister of India, Mother Teresa, a few, and then Helen Keller, women. So we might break it down to a topic in terms of political engagement, voter rights, political engagement, and of course Hillary Clinton's a good start. I mean, sure. The first female Democratic nominee for president of the United States, and of course you've got Kamala Harris, but I wouldn't put Kamala Harris in the same stead as Hillary, because Hillary, when you think about it, really did have an extensive experience, not only as the First Lady, but as a U.S. Senator and Secretary of State. And, I saw her a few weeks ago on Chuck Todd on Meet the Press. And despite all of her criticism, I tell you what, she's really knowledgeable about world affairs.
Right.
She really understands economic and policy issues. Unfortunately, she really lost the last election, I think, because of attacks on her character and the whole email thing. But at least maybe Hillary can look back at her life and say that all the work that she did would break down that glass ceiling. And I'll end with this: the United States of America, what amazes me is that we're the only country in the developed world, one of the only ones that have never had a female leader. And, I actually think that our country would benefit from a female president. I think it would bring a different perspective, a different kind of emotional intelligence to the position. And it might be time for a different look. I mean, let's face it, the presidency hasn't really gone well for us the last 8 years. And I think it might be time for a change.
Well, yeah, but China and Russia didn't have one either. And neither, I'm not sure about Australia, but I don't know what goes down under in Australia, because we don't get any news from what. Oh, wait, there's somebody who just arrived from Australia. So maybe he can give us some news. Did they ever have a prime minister in Australia that was female? Maybe Shaquille wouldn't know the answer to that question off the top of his head.
Yes, we did.
You did? Oh my Lord. Okay.
And she was a terrible prime minister.
A terrible prime minister, like Margaret Thatcher.
But she wasn't a terrible prime minister because she was a woman. So Steve's comment about Hillary lost the election, partially what he said was because of the female thing. What female thing? I mean,
I think she lost the election because of her character flaws, I think.
Yeah, not because she was a female. And this is the whole thing. Like with Kamala Harris, she was put there because she was black and she was a woman. So the pool of candidates that she had to compete against was not as big. Hillary Clinton earned and deserved that nomination. And the two most suitable candidates for the Democrats at that time was clearly Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton.
Bernie Sanders? I'm sorry.
So, he was number two.
I don't agree with Bernie Sanders' political ideas. I don't agree with them. But he had enough support and he had enough respect. He had enough experience. So between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, they were the two best candidates that the Democrats had going into that election. And most people thought that Hillary Clinton would win. I thought she was going to win, to be honest. I don't actually agree that the last 8 years has just been terrible. If people put aside their dislike for Donald Trump as a person and have a look at the policies, I don't think that if you look at things in overall in their total, that the United States was worse off because of him. It's yet to be seen whether Biden will produce the same thing, but most presidents are the same. Most presidents, the country ends up overall being a bit better than what it was. Even those presidents that we didn't really like or that sort of went down not in the best of ways, like Nixon did. But most presidents, even as I said, even the ones that we might not agree with some of the time, Bill Clinton, for example, there was a lot of things in his presidency that really overshadowed his accomplishments. But he did do a lot of things that really helped the United States at that time. So, George Bush is another person. He gets criticized for having gone into Iraq and Afghanistan. He gets criticized for that war, and was he just trying to avenge his father's, his father's history, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, the one, the economy did boom under him, but two, what was he supposed to do? The people don't look at the alternatives, and it's very hard to measure what would have happened had somebody done something differently. It's hard to measure, right? So, like my criticism of Biden, the biggest thing I criticize Biden about is his withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think it was an absolute farce what happened. However, what do? Do you sit there and look at that and say, well, he shouldn't have come out at all or whatever? It's hard to measure what would have happened had he done it differently.
Right.
But I do think that he should have done it differently. And I think that there was a certain element of arrogance where he didn't listen to his own advisors. And he really was quite flippant with the ideas of the allies. So, people didn't want to come out in the way that he wanted to come out of there. And that was a total failure on his part, which potentially has led to other things. So yeah, look, I think that to try and distill the very complicated issues and what people's motivations are for voting one way or another, down to it's about gender or skin color or something like that, I just don't think it's true. And why would it be? It's not true anywhere else in the world. The UK has elected 2 female prime ministers now, and at tumultuous times. Just quickly on the Ukraine-Russia crisis. So what would have been the early hours of the morning for you guys, the reports started coming out saying, look, the sanctions don't appear to be working, and the only way for us to really do anything is to, put sanctions on Russian energy exports. So what has happened? Some analysts have said that they're surprised that oil hasn't run up to $130 a barrel. So before the markets have opened in your time, although oil trades 24 hours a day, before the markets have opened, oil has actually gone past $100. The futures contracts for next month is well past 100 now. I think it's at 102. So we are beginning to see some movements. We're also beginning to see something that I think is quite interesting. Although the markets are down a little bit, it's not too dramatic just yet. It's only 0.5%. But what we are seeing is a rush back into US currency or US notes, specifically, as in US Treasury notes. Now, with very, very low yields, that doesn't make a lot of sense for people to do that, except for when they need to park money in a safe haven. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, Sasha Starr, welcome to the show. And as hopefully one day I'd love to join your international show, but as a precursor to warm up, he's our Russian analyst. And so, and then before we leave, we're going to just we already gave one woman to talk about, but a woman in Canada that you think, that we should be, or someone around the world that we should honor because it is Women's History Month. But give us your take on what I talked about today in the monologue. Things not going so well for Russia. Obviously, economically, the ruble going down 20% compared to the euro. Economically, what they're facing, and the fact that the cities aren't being taken over as quickly. They're still making their way to Kyiv. So, do you believe that this means that we have to continue to monitor, or do you believe that this could be a failed war for Putin, or is it too early to tell?
You said we need to monitor. Who is we? Our channel?
Yeah, our analysts. I mean,
our channel, and of course the United States. Yes.
No, I mean when I say we, I mean people observing this crisis, political analysts, observers saying, okay, the war isn't like an immediate takeover of Ukraine. There's still a lot of Ukrainian resistance in terms of defending their airspace, and now there's people saying that he's going to start going into civilian bombing civilian areas like what he did in Chechnya and Syria. But do you believe that this thing's going to draw out for a long time, or will he eventually just cave and say, I'm done? I don't see him turning back. He's never going to want to say the war was a failure, right, at this point.
Yeah, and it's hard to get information, Sasha. I mean, what I saw in the news was a 40-mile convoy of tanks heading toward Kyiv. Now, that is not boding well, I think, for the Ukrainians. But it's like I said, even over here in the United States, it's very difficult to get information, or frankly, accurate information of what's going on over there. But if they do have a 40-mile convoy of tanks heading toward Kyiv, how are they going to stop the tanks?
Very, very, very easy. Tanks are very effective in on its way to Kyiv. Once you enter the Kyiv, that's the end of story. All those tanks will be destroyed one by one. So they can surround Kyiv. They can control the access to Kyiv. So that would mean that the war will be going on for another 2 months, and that's not what Putin really wants or needs. So I really don't see how he will take over Kyiv, and especially if Mr. Zelensky is now what's supposed to be in city of Lviv or its surroundings. So even taking out Kyiv is not going to help Putin at all. So he'll take Kyiv, but then what?
Well, the question I have is, first, will he be able to get those tanks over? Because, if you blow up bridges and you got to go across a waterway, that could be a real problem. Problem number two is, and I'm not just sure about the strength of the Ukrainian army. When I saw it, it was actually pretty strong, but do they have enough anti-tank missiles to blow them up? I'm just not really sure. And we're getting like zero information over here, and it's
I'm getting information right from the ground in Kyiv.
Okay.
Believe it or not, what's happened just yesterday, kids, 10, 11 years old kids, with Molotov cocktails, when there was a tanks, formation of tanks were moving on, what they did, they burned the first tank. Now, once that's done, the second tank cannot go any farther. So he's trying to maneuver and find its way. The third tank is now being burned.
Yeah.
So now the fourth one is trying to figure out what to do. The fifth tank is done. They all turned away and went down. Of course, if Russia will send 500,000 tanks, it's a question of logistics. How many Molotov cocktails?
Yes.
People
Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
We can hear you, Steve.
Sorry, I apologize. There was some. Well, Shasha, thank you. We're going to come back to Russia, but we have Mark Lee that's joined us. Mark, what is a woman? It's Women's History Month, so we're just sort of going around the table. I'll go back.
We've gone from Black History Month to Women's History Month.
Well, no, but
How?
We have, and we've definitely done that and everything. But my question for y'all is, can y'all hear Steve? Because I hear Steve talking, but I don't hear him on my side of the computer. So, like I said, I hear him talking, but I don't hear him over here.
Well, the others hear me. So, Shaquille, you asked my question to Mark until he. Who's this?
I heard you,
Mark,
Shaquille.
can you hear me?
I hear you. I hear Shaquille. I hear Sasha. I hear Nick. I hear everybody but Steve.
I'm not sure why, because we can hear Steve. So Steve's question to you is, I won't even put my take on your question. He's basically asking about Women's History Month, and I've responded with, wow, we've gone from Black History Month to Women's History Month. I personally think that, maybe next month we could have we could go down here, because you said that about colorism, so we could maybe look at different skin color shades. Then maybe we could have, Asian History Month. Maybe we could have
there is an Asian month
for non-binary people. We could do all sorts of different history months.
There is different months. There is the Women's History Month. There is an Asian, if not months, there are weeks. There are usually different things to celebrate different ethnicities.
Why do Asians only get a week? Why can't they have a month like every other oppressed minority?
Let me double check that. There may even actually be an Asian month, but I do know that a lot of different groups have different organizations. I mean, there's even a Polish situation as well. But whether it's a week or a month, I mean, the big complaint about Black History Month used to be that it was the shortest month and that it should be celebrated all year long. That's the complaint that I've always heard.
We should have Black History in permanence. We should just erase white people, I think.
No, that's not it at all. It's basically the argument is that you shouldn't have to, what you just said, that you shouldn't have to just celebrate the fact of there being historical Black figures at one time frame of the year.
I agree, Mark.
You should also be able to celebrate it at all times of the year.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to celebrate them at all, right? We celebrate the historical figures that we find, if they find incredible. You know, people didn't need to have a Black History Month to celebrate Martin Luther King, and there's streets named after him, and you know, everybody in America and most people in the world know his name. You know, we don't need a Black History Month.
But we did get a day for Martin Luther King, and that was a whole other struggle, wasn't when we had the whole struggle, and there were some countries that did not want to, I mean, not countries, but some states and others did not want to honor his name, so they did not want to give him a day. So there was definitely some states, some cities, and other places did not want to give Martin Luther King a day, but they did eventually give him a national holiday. So like I said, that was a whole debate that was back several years ago as to whether there should even be a day honoring him. But then most people
there's 365 days in the year. I'm sure that we can find other historical figures to fill up the rest of the days. And then you could just have a public holiday that lasts the whole year. And we just sit there and celebrate every single character that fills some sort of minority. And when we say celebrate, we mean loot and riot and throw Molotov cocktails.
When we say celebrate, the other argument,
rip down statues. That would be
the other argument about the celebrations in the past has been that they become, and you'll love this one, Shaquille and even Sasha, is that they become another excuse for corporations to have a sale. So that was the other thing that people raised around even Martin Luther King Day, was that it was another day to have a sale, much like Valentine's Day, much like Easter, much like a number of other places. So then it just became another corporate holiday where a lot of people didn't even recognize the merit of the day or the reason for having the day. As for there being a lot of historical figures with days, I don't know if you've ever looked at the calendar, but I can pretty much just name anything in the world that has a day for it. I mean, there's a day to celebrate the fight against hunger. There's a day to celebrate just about every disease that you want to name and everything. There's a day to celebrate various people. If you look at the 365 days of the calendar, there is usually something that is on that calendar that is being celebrated. And sometimes you're even going like, I can't believe that this is an actual holiday. As a matter of fact, I may look up later on what March 1st is a celebration of. I know that there's even been like days to celebrate swing.
Steve wants to say something. I'm not sure if you can hear him yet, but I'll repeat his
question
without me adding anything to it. I'll just repeat his question.
I don't know why you can't hear me, but anyway, what I was saying was that real quickly, as we get out of the Women's History Month for a minute, I wanted to let everyone know that it looks as if politics is once again. I'm going to be closing out today to talk about the State of the Union address tonight. President Biden will be delivering his State of the Union. But with that being said, he has placed forth his nomination of.
I did not hear the questions. If you want to repeat it.
He hasn't asked the question yet, Mark. He's just saying he'll be closing out later, and President Biden will be delivering a State of the Union address.
Yeah.
Steve, continue.
Yeah, I can hear you.
But I may get out. But just to let you know just how crazy it can get with the holidays.
Hang on, Mark. Steve hasn't finished speaking yet. He's still going. I'm not sure why you can hear everyone else and not us. I'm not sure what the.
I have no idea, but I may pop back out and in. Sorry for being late this morning and everything, but just really quickly as I do that and everything, just to let you know how crazy things are. These are the days that are on March 1st, and you're going to love these. Some of these are days that are in other countries. March 1st, today is Baby Sleep Day. It is Endometriosis Awareness Day. It is International Women of Color Day, to go to your point and everything. It is a Hindu holiday, Maja Shivaratri. It is a Mardi Gras Carnival, which is a major one. It's National Black Women in Jazz and the Arts Day. It's National Dadgum. That's a good day. It's National Fruit Combati Day. It's National Horse Protection Day. It's National Peanut Butter Lovers Day. It's National Pig Day. It's National Sportsmanship Day. It's National Wedding Planning Day. It's the Nuclear Free and Independent Pacific Day, Bikini Day. It is the Peace Corps Day. It's Planned a Solo Vacation Day. It's Retired. It's Refired, not Retired Day. It's Self-Injury Awareness Day. It's Share a Smile Day. It's Shrove Tuesday, St. David's Day, Town Meeting Day in Vermont, World Civil Defense Day, World Compliment Day. So I should be complimenting you today. Is Zero Discrimination Day. I do like that holiday and everything. And this one, you will love.
Zero discrimination.
This one you will love. In Iceland, it is Beer Day. It is Beer Day in Iceland on March 1st.
Sasha, can you see what's happened, Sasha? We have dickheads in charge. Maybe we should just capitulate and let Putin take over.
Sasha, start, please.
I'd like to ask everyone here on the panel. We have international show. We are discussing we were discussing the issue of Ukraine, Russia, and what's happening there is the latest. And then all that being derailed for the last 15 minutes or so into absolutely garbage, meaningless discussion about nothing. Why would you do that?
Because we have a show just following this that's on China, Russia, Ukraine.
We'll get back on track to the international.
So that I think starts in about 30 minutes, Sasha. But since we went to this crazy what day it is, I got 2 ones for the panel. International Chess Day, July 20th. National Chess Day, October 8th. So remember, panel, do not forget the International Chess Day that's coming up on July 20th. That is more important than, of course, Ukraine and invading Russia.
By the way, do you think that chess is completely immune from politics? Absolutely not. You know, there are 2 Russian grandmasters, namely Karyakin and Shipov, who voiced their support for Mr. Putin. Mm-hmm. They are now being called for ethic commission of the FIDE, that they will be scrutinized there. Now, Russians chess players, although they can still play in some important tournaments, not under the Russian flag, and no Russian anthem could be performed if, in case someone will win the tournament. So now there is another question. If tournament is being held in, say, European Union or United States, or just anywhere outside of Russia for that matter, how they will ever get there? I understand they can play online if it's online tournament, but if it's actually over the board normal tournament, how the hell they will get there? Which way? The planes are just absolutely out.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's a Republican, will bring her private plane.
About Marjorie Taylor
will
Greene
bring her private plane over.
One more time.
She's also a Putin. She's a Republican Putin supporter.
I appreciate Sasha's start.
Yes, she is, and she definitely. We went to that whole discussion yesterday about her being in a crowd and which crowd she was, and of course she's getting all kinds of whitelash and backlash. I guess is the correct term, and all of that. But she's getting all kinds of backlash about what she said and what she didn't say, and I'm still doing research on that. To answer your question, Sasha, I believe Shaquille asked me a question about the whole thing around gender and race. So that's how the conversation went into holidays and everything. So I might have taken that a little bit too far, and I will apologize for that to you and everything, because that was a little bit more of a segue that we probably did not need to go into. But there was the whole question around, or somebody asked it around gender and things of that nature. I will say that this whole Ukraine and Russian crisis, and then I'm going to bounce out and see if that's the reason that my internet is acting up, because I'm only hearing everybody but Steve. But I'm going to check on that really quickly. But I will say that it has even impacted our own shows, because I know that yesterday I had a guest that was going to be on, and she is an international model and poet and a number of other things, May Riley. And when I was talking to her, part of the reason that she did not make it was because she had been up all evening watching the news. So she had definitely was one of those people, like many of us, that was not watching and then impacted by what was going on in the world. So she didn't feel ready to talk about her career because she's worried whether, as Nick would put it, there'll be a world for her to model in. So that's one of the things that she gave as one of her reasons when I reached back out to her on LinkedIn, and I have not heard from her today. So, but there are a lot of people even around the world, because I believe she's here in the United States, that are concerned about what's going on. So on that note, I'm going to bounce out, let y'all continue about the discussion there, and I will bounce back and hear if I can hear Steve, because I'm hearing everybody but Steve. So I'll be right back.
Well, let's continue our discussion. And Sasha, we didn't mean to get derailed. I will be emailing you, Sasha, about possibly coming on PBS this week. The news stations reached out to me about a full hour show on Russia, Ukraine. So I'll
wait.
check with
Sasha's going to be on PBS.
Yeah, I think he'd be a great perspective because he's a Russian.
Well, just because he lived in Ukraine and he fought for the Soviets.
I think it'd be a very interesting. Well, Sasha, I'll shoot you a note about the background, but I think your name came up as somebody, and I apologize for derailing off that topic. But let's get back on track. I'll shoot you separately on that, Sasha. But let's get back on track. So, what I was saying was in the U.S. we've got the State of the Union coming up tonight. We've got the Supreme Court judge nomination on the table. Joe Manchin has joined again on opposing some abortion laws. But as we get back to the State of the Union, Sasha, we're going to start with you. Then we're going to go to Shaquille and Nick. What should President Biden say tonight? Or what do you think that the administration needs to do? Are we doing everything we can in this crisis? What advice would you have to the White House?
It's a very interesting situation right now. It's a time that the history presents U.S. a chance to get rid of Putin and all Russian threats. It's the third time. As I said before, the first time it was between 1952 and 58. The second chance was in 1991, 1992. Now it's the third time. Right now, little Ukraine, which was not even second-rated power, not probably even the third, it was really as a war power, it was really nothing. Hey, all of a sudden, Russia now, for almost a week, they cannot overrun a stiff resistance of Ukrainian heroes. And if there would be just very little support from the West and US, guess what? Putin would be toppled. His own people would take this creature and just tear it apart. Okay, just as simple as that. But he has, of course, very high-placed friends. For example, Mr. Trump in the United States and some other Republicans. So maybe he'll survive just that. But then the threats of the nuclear attack will be there as long as you live, whether you like it or not. And Putin is in very good health. He may run Russia for another 30-some years.
Yeah. I mean, he really is in good health. I mean, he's 69. He's swimming. He's running. He's top athlete.
Judo.
Yeah, judo. Shaquille Latimer, let's go to you. Obviously, I know where you stand on Biden. Obviously, you probably don't think the State of the Union is very strong. Any advice?
We're not some sort of third world country. We do have access to things like our closest allies' State of the Union address.
Yeah, but what do you think? What do you think he's going to say? What is your take on the State of the Union? And we're getting ready for the show tonight. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think what he should say is, "Sorry, I've screwed up. I resign, and so does Kamala Harris, and we'll put anybody else in charge. Maybe one of those 5-year-old kids down at the kindergarten, just put them in charge. They'll do a better job." Look, I think he'll true to form, he'll mumble through it and stumble, and it won't be a real show of strength. So hopefully it'll be a short State of the Union. He needs to address a number of issues. One is the ongoing issues with the coronavirus and the effects that's going to have, and what the plan is for getting America open again. And that puts him in a difficult position because now he has to go back on the things that he said before, masks work and all these things. You have to keep locked down. He has to address the supply chain issues. And of course, he's going to have to address the elephant in the room, which is what's happening, not just what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine, but what the United States intends to do as a reaction to it. And I think he has to actually be clear and manage people's expectations. Is it his view that sanctions will be enough? I mean, I think that's the hope. I think everybody hopes that by just having very, very strong sanctions on Russia, by excluding them from the SWIFT global payment system and those sorts of things, it'll just make it so difficult for Russia to do anything. Oil now, Russian oil, I'm reading is trading at a $10 discount to the rest of oil. Suppliers are worried about payments, all that sort of stuff. So I'm sure the world hopes that will be enough to, for Putin to pull back. But then Putin's not going to go quietly into the night, is he? He's going to want to stay with that image of strength. So he's not going to want to look like a loser in this. So the question is, is the US prepared to use military forces if necessary? And what does Putin need to do before the United States would be prepared to deploy their military? So I think all those questions are things that he needs to address. And I think he needs to stay on those things. Also, he's going to need to address, outside of the Ukraine and back to domestic issues, exactly what his plan is for Build Back Better. Where does that stand now? What does it look like? What does the next couple of years look like for the average American family? Are they going to be able to afford petrol? Or gas? Are they going to be able to, heat their homes coming into winter? All those sort of things I think need to be addressed by him.
Absolutely. Nick Paldiva, what are your thoughts on the State of the Union tonight?
My thoughts is that we still haven't got rid of COVID. I think that the media has been doing a really poor job and telling people how many people died yesterday in the United States of COVID. It was like 1,800 people yesterday just died. Can you imagine if 1,800 people in Ukraine were shot by the Russians? We would hear about it all day long. 1,800 people. Well, guess what? Yesterday, 1,800 people in the United States died of COVID-19, and we don't hear squat. What we do hear is, we got to take our mask off and everything's fine. What has happened is the media has done a horrible job.
How many people died of heart disease yesterday?
Well, the thing is,
how many people died of other
heart disease, as you well know, since your mother was or currently is a nurse, and mine was also a registered nurse and head of Tampa General Hospital's nursing division at one time. The thing is, heart disease is a constant. Okay, same with cancer, a leading cause of death. COVID is not a constant. It's actually a fluctuating disease that has moved up tremendously and is ignored by our government. In other words, it's almost like, hey, 1,800 people died. Hey, so what? And so we've taken a new attitude, a new approach that it's acceptable. Just like there's 12,000 people in the United States who die of being shot in the United States because of murdered by guns. It has now been an acceptable mortality statistic. Now, working in the insurance industry, they're going to have to factor it in, because they're going like, wait a minute, we had a lot of death claims in our company and even on our network because of COVID-19. And so the thing is, I think what we're doing, what the politicians and the CDC and the media is disingenuous by shoving it aside and saying it's all over with in the name of quote unquote freedom, when we still have hundreds and thousands of people die of this needless disease every day.
But you want to draw attention to it, and you want to make all these comments about all these people that want to take the mask.
Yeah, sure. More people died of COVID-19 yesterday than they did in Ukraine.
So you want to make the connection that that people shouldn't want to take their masks off, that people shouldn't want to get back to their normal life. The reality is that if people have had their vaccinations, if they've had their boosters, this is something that we have to live with, and people should be able to make their own choices. No. Now, if you are going to say that they should continue to surrender their freedom, you need to be able to show that by surrendering their freedom, that's going to reduce the death count. And unless you can show that, on what basis do you make that argument, other than you just wanting to attack people for wanting their freedom?
There's studies that have been done by reputable institutions, not these crazy people that are Republican deplorables. These are people that are actually medical doctors, MD, PhD.
Yes, so basically,
shown that if you had a mask and I have a mask, and
so
you're
basically,
vaccinated and I'm vaccinated, there's almost zero chance.
So basically, so
what you're doing is you're ignoring that and saying, I'm going to allow a guy who has an IQ of 50 make my decisions.
So basically, the only people that are reputable in your eyes are people who aren't Republicans. No, so people who don't agree with 100% of the democratic principles that they've set forward, those people are deplorable and they shouldn't be listened to. And the only reputable information is the people that do agree with all of this stuff. But let me ask you, if that's how you feel, how do you feel about all of these Democratic politicians that have been caught at baseball games who say, oh, I was holding my breath? You know, all of these different people that have been caught without their masks on for photo opportunities and all of that. What's their excuse? If it's all Republicans' fault, all Republicans' responsibility.
No. The thing is, those are the bad idiot Democrats. I mean, the thing is, I'm bipartisan on this issue, my friend. Okay. In other words, the thing is, I just. Hey, look, it's like this, Shaquille. I don't have a high tolerance for stupid people. Okay?
Then you should be criticizing the Democrats much more than you currently do. Because only the idiots, except for Steve, go into politics in the first place. And that's that end up in power.
That might be true. But I'm just saying the thing is, don't take COVID off the table, media, which they did, and replace it with Ukraine, which they did. Feed us this agenda about Ukraine when there are more people in the United States today will die of COVID than will have the Russians shooting the people in Ukraine.
Well, we can't ignore the situation in Ukraine. I mean, Russia going to Ukraine, which has been building for a long time. I mean, there's been signs of that happening for a long time. But him going in there is a major world event.
So, and it's a major world event too. There are a lot of people that are saying that we should ignore Ukraine. I mean, what's the big deal?
Whatever we do, this tests the mettle of the West. You know, the question is, when the West says do not do
the West. Come on.
The question is when the West says do not do this thing, otherwise there'll be, you know, severe consequences. And then he goes and does, or anybody goes and does that thing. What's the consequence? And I still would say, and Sasha, again, you know, if you want to make a comment here, the problem with Russia is, other than economic sanctions, what else can you really do? I mean, you can have some military action there, right? You could have some military action in Ukraine, but it's not like it's a small country with a small military that you can just go in and take over that country. You would have a lot of problems trying to actually go in and occupy Russia, right? So what could the West actually do here, in your opinion?
Okay, wait a minute. Let me speak for this one-sided Western deal, okay? Here, NATO grabs Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and they sit there and they park missiles around Russia. And Russia's supposed to go, we like this. Come on. And the thing is, he made a strong case, Putin, actually he made a weak case because he doesn't know how to communicate, about what are we doing here, allowing a country like Ukraine, and why did we allow Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania to become NATO countries in our backyard?
Let me answer that, Nick.
Yeah,
because Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, and Poland, 4 countries that you mentioned, by the time of their application to NATO, all of them were independent states.
And Cuba is an independent state also.
Who?
Cuba. Cuba is an independent state, Mr. Western. Why shouldn't Putin be allowed to put missiles in Cuba? Talk to me.
Well, he did, didn't he? He did once, didn't he?
About that, and he will not be allowed, period. Why? Because the Cold War were ended with Russia and at that time Soviet Union defeated. They lost. They are losers. You see what happened? For example, Trump lost election. So what he can do? He cannot do it. You're fighting, but it doesn't matter.
Come on, Sasha. You're back to might makes right. Okay, the thing is,
yes, absolutely.
Putin was trying to make a case.
Okay, so Putin was able to rebuild Soviet Russian military, and West was closing its eyes. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Maybe he did, but not to such a level. Maybe he did it just a little bit over here and over there, but not over there. hey, the payback time now. Now West is going to confront Putin to stay where it is now, or it has to retreat big time. Forget about all your armies in the Europe, NATO, all that. It's dissolved, and that's what Trump was supposed to do that. But Trump was unable, so Putin will do that for you.
Yeah,
And get
but again,
back, and stay there until Putin will not attack you anyway one day. So now, in the moment of Putin's weakness, which has not happened very often, but it is now. Now it's time to attack him. Clear sky over no-fly zone over the Ukraine. Enforce it. Do it now, because in a couple of years he will declare no-fly zone in United States.
Okay, Sasha, thank you for that perspective. And so, the thing I would also add, just something I've observed as we looked around the world, is in the 90s we had, when the Berlin Wall came down, all in addition to the Soviet Union dissolving, all of the birth of these Eastern European democracies, right? And how quickly things. Who would have ever thought that 30 years later, that all of a sudden you would have a complete shift back to dictatorships and autocracy, not only in Russia, but all the other countries we've talked about. And, the question becomes, what's driving that? Is it that the democracies just aren't working for the people, or is it easier to live in a country from that perspective where just one supreme leader can just say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to give you food, I'm going to do this, I'm going to keep you safe? And, that's the thing that is hard to understand. And I think it's a good discussion for all of us to have, because I do like Sasha Starr today pushing us to stick on this show on issues that are relevant around the world. But I think that's a conversation that we all have in common, right? So I just wanted to get that going as a
Steve, let me mention that by nature people are lazy and complacent. So the idea of a supreme ruler such as Ayatollah or some maniac Putin or something else, that appeals to majority of people. They feel, oh, listen, he's going to protect us. We don't have to worry about anything. Everything is done. So I think that slowly, at least for now, many countries and also the autocratic regimes proved to be quite successful in terms of how they manage their affairs, how they control things at home and abroad. And therefore, there is a trend. I agree with you, Steve. There is a trend to autocratic regimes all over the world. U.S. was almost there with Trump. Would he win second term? It would be there for sure. But wait, he'll win 24th election, so he'll finish his job. And it's happening everywhere. And I'm trying to think very hard about the countries that still remains democratic and not allow autocrats to rule. And I'm at loss. Actually, it's difficult for me to find even such a country.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one myself, but I would agree with you on one thing that you just said, which is that people are fundamentally lazy. We can see that in the way that a lot of political action committees and others are the ones that are who people pick for their candidates. They go by what people have told them to vote for and then not necessarily research the issues on their own merits. So I would agree with you on that. I don't know that I would agree that people like to be necessarily controlled by the government, even though you may have a point, because a lot of people also like to have their religious leaders tell them what to do as well. But I don't know that people, as a fundamental rule, like to have all of their needs taken care of in the sense of being almost like a newborn baby and things along those lines. So I'm not sure that I quite buy that. Maybe it's just that I'm more fiercely independent than the rest of the people out there, because I know that I'm not trying to do that in my own situation and all along those lines. Just really quickly, because I was going to bring it up yesterday, and it is another global issue. And just really quickly, that I'd love to hear people's thoughts about. I know Shaquille's going to have some very interesting issues around this, and I know we've got only a few minutes. But while the Ukraine is going on, and while there's other debates that are going on, there's also, including whether we're out or in of the pandemic, there is also the global climate crisis. And there was a recent UN report about that, and they focus on impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability. And this assessment or edition, called the Sixth Assessment Report, is different from previous iterations in many ways. But one of the most striking, according to several of the news reports that I've heard, is that it was referencing to global climate equality. While previous versions referenced poor or developing countries, often they barely talked about them in the context of equality, inclusivity, or justice at all. So apparently there has been this whole conversation around climate change and whether small island nation states, coming back to who's ruling who, indigenous people and poor communities in drought and flood-stricken regions, the majority of whom live in parts of the world that for the most part have barely contributed to the problem. And of course, there's been a push for the wealthy countries to step up their name, their part of what's going on, and to actually give money to some of those countries to help in the fight against climate change and some of the things that are going on in that sense, because they say that a lot of those developing countries lack the right representation due to difficulties in the pandemic and all along those lines. So I was wondering what folks' thoughts are when this new report is saying that yes, climate change is real, but it is impacting a lot of the poorer nations in a different sort of way, and that the rich nations need to help the poorer nations in this sense. I guess this would be one of them cases of what you're talking about, Sasha, where they are asking for a overlord to help them out.
Okay.
Sasha, start, please.
We are minutes away from a nuclear war. In the case of nuclear war, there will be no rich nations, no poor nations. The climate issue right now, although I'm a strong proponent of measures to be taken to ensure the climate change issue will be resolved, put it and scrap it for now, totally. Increase the oil and gas production. Make Russia disabled, unable to sell their resources of oil and gas. Forget about climate control issue for now, because in case of nuclear war, there will be no climate changes except from a nuclear war. So scrap it. Nonsense. Probably it is anyway, but especially now in this situation, just forget about all climate issues. Please.
Sasha, if and look, I agree with you as far as I care deeply about the environment. I don't give a shit about the identity politics and them trying to use that in a conversation about environment. I think that's ridiculous. But just as what you've said there about sort of killing the Russian economy by sanctioning their oil. Look, the world can survive without their oil by getting oil from other oil-producing places. It might drive prices up, but it depends on whether the other OPEC nations increase production. The question, though, is what about other things that Russia provides, such as wheat? Because there's a very big percentage of the population of this world that relies on Russian agriculture. Do we have enough to feed people?
Ukraine has it all. Ukraine has it all. Ukraine's actually grain from Ukraine is in quality is 10 times better than Russian, and it can supply abundance of that. And also, look, we are looking now at a situation when Russia's reserves of about 2/3 of $1 trillion are being frozen. This is why I'm trying to explain to you why nuclear attack from Russia is getting almost imminent, because unless this $2.3 trillion will be immediately released by the West, Russia will be choked to death in next 2-3 days. Putin is already, their stock market is closed for second day in a row. The ruble nosedive, and they will not be able to survive because Putin never calculated that this amount of money will be frozen because he relied on it in all his plans. He said, yeah, okay, there will be sanctions, there will be this and that, but with almost two-thirds of trillions of dollars, we can survive for quite a long time. Guess what? He doesn't have an access to most of it. So what do you think he's going to do? I said yesterday in the program myself, if I would have that amount, say $1 trillion, my own $1 trillion would be frozen somewhere. Would I start nuclear war? Absolutely yes.
Yeah, I mean, particularly when you've got people on the other side that are urging you to kill yourself, because definitely that is what one of the Ukrainian ambassadors said. Was they made the comparison of Putin to Hitler, and they basically told him to go off to a bunker and take his own life and just spare the world of what's going on in that sense. And then we've also got people that are spreading a whole lot of disinformation. I know we oftentimes talk about the media. Of course, we had our show Media Monday yesterday, and there are a lot of folks that are even in that social media space that are making this a more conspiracy-oriented thing. Some of them are people like that person that we were talking about, Marjorie Taylor Greene, earlier, that are using the whole deep state kind of argument because they're saying that, you know, there's a whole deep state kind of conspiracy happening, and that that this is really nothing but an illusion and all of that. And some of these folks have a lot of following. So I was wondering, how can we counter some of these misreports that we know are misreports that are coming from folks that have, in some cases, government positions, and in some cases not government positions, because they're spreading theories that this could even be what they call a false flag operation with the goal of shutting down the internet. So why you would want that to happen is beyond me and everything, but definitely that is what some of those people are saying. And yes, I was being sarcastic when I said that.
Well, listen, and I you know, anyone, any comments on that? Well, Mark, but we're about to close out, so I didn't want to.
No, I think we've covered most things off. I'll just say, just for people who are wondering what's happening with the ruble, for example. So trading on most of the ECNs have actually been suspended. So it's very hard to see what price it is, but it actually seems, it looks like on the chart that I was looking at before that it actually spiked up to 118. $1 buying 118. It wasn't there for long, but briefly it was. And that's coming from a currency that generally was at 60. Now, I actually had some small trades on it because I was just playing around with it back when it was at 75, 80, and I made a few 100,000 rubles. These weren't big trades. And then I left some of my trades actually on because, it appeared that the currency was devaluing pretty quickly. And then I got some notifications saying, hey, there's restrictions, there's all these different things. And I ignored them and just left the position on to see what would happen. And I didn't get out at 118, but I got out at a pretty reasonable price. But I didn't choose to get out. My broker actually liquidated my position and converted my balance, my Russian rubles balance, into US dollars. So I wasn't even allowed to hold the currency. So that's very interesting. And again, how does that fare for the everyday Russian that's living there? One of the things that I've read a report about is that anybody who is in the political position that he is in, that Putin is in, has to be very careful about making sure that the wealthy people that support him are actually able to continue maintain their wealth, because if that goes away, their power goes away.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, quick to our closeout. We want to wish everyone a great start off to the Women's History Month, and we've had a wonderful discussion on Russia, Ukraine. And as I close out real quickly, tonight at approximately, I think, 9 p.m. or sooner, the President of the United States will deliver what is historically known as a State of the Union to a joint session of Congress. It's always amazing when you watch the State of the Union. After all of the rhetoric and hateful talk on both sides, when they say, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States, normally there's applause, there's energy, and they listen to the president. They all run to shake his hand. It'll be interesting to see what happens today as Joe Biden delivers a hard State of the Union. The argument he'll be making to the people that is America better off than it was when he was taking the oath of office for the president. I think it's a hard thing to say it is. We got off to a great start with vaccination. with getting getting the stimulus packages passed. But the things really started to turn south for this president with Afghanistan, the Omicron and Delta variants, the inability to bring freedom from the pandemic, which you promised would be here by last summer, and of course, inflation. In addition, we're seeing the Ukraine and Russia crisis now unfolding. And I think it's fair to say that this president, who Fareed Zakaria once called the accidental president, a president that came in because of Trump and COVID, is now finding this job much harder than he bargained for. He has a tough act tonight. We'll be watching closely as Joseph R. Biden, the 46th president of the United States, delivers the State of the Union and makes a case that the State of the Union is stronger today than he was when he took the oath of office. We will be back tomorrow for another edition to talk about the State of the Union and what our thoughts are about the situation here in the U.S. and around the world.
And as we head on out, just really quickly and everything, I was going to tell folks that they can go, if they haven't already gone, to the show around the Ukraine and Russia crisis that Sasha Starr is leading. And that, of course, is taking place right now. And I don't know, Steve, whether we're going to be doing women history figures every day like we try to do just about every day for Black history and all of that. But if we are,
maybe once a week, once a week, maybe on Friday, we'll just name one leader, and that way we're not taking the show. So, I've got to. We'll go ahead.
That's cool and everything, and we'll keep that in mind and everything. And I'm going to put on the closeout video and everything. I know he said once a week, but I already had 2 in my mind for today. But we'll save 2 more for next Friday. That was going to be Eleanor Roosevelt and Lady Bird Johnson, because both of those have some very interesting views, and we're definitely not just figureheads in office. So they were definitely some people that tried to make a change in the world, and all along those lines, while their husbands were serving as presidents. So those would be 2 that I would add to the list of people that folks should research and think about as women leaders. But right now, let's get this video to get us on out of here.